Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. In Megan Griffiths' new film, Sadie, an adolescent girl living with her single mother in a trailer park confronts the new realities of her mother's needs as a single woman, her burgeoning sexuality, and the strained relationship she has with administrators at school. Let's take a look.
Hey, Dad. Got your letter. I wrote a paper for class where I tried to imagine my life as a soldier with you. Mr. Lee will probably hate it. Teachers can't handle violent stuff, even though it's literally everywhere.
Let him go!
Miss you, Sadie.
I saw the letter from your dad. I thought he'd be coming home this time, too.
She's not home yet.
Oh, yeah, no, she's held up at the hospital. I told her I'd wait for her.
Was that from your dad? How's he doing anyways?
I guess he's doing okay, considering you're over here trying to sleep with his wife while he's defending our country.
Hey.
I can't hear again that he's gonna stay over there. It's driving me crazy.
I don't think you owe that man another day. You know this is your neighbor, right?
Hi, hello.
The neighbors getting neighborly.
These horrors that you're writing about, they got extreme consequences.
She's a teenager. She's allowed to be a little bit ornery.
Do you want to tell me what's going on there, Sadie?
I'm fine. He's gonna be okay. We're kids, Francis. Nobody cares what we do.
Everybody, please welcome Megan Griffiths. Hey. So much to talk about with this movie. It's really beautiful. You do a wonderful job. And this girl who you found, who is she? She's amazing.
She's so good.
She's
Her name is
really
Sophia
great.
Mitri Schloss. She's Seattle-based actor, which was kind of amazing because I'm Seattle-based. We shot the film north of Seattle in Everett, and we were not at all expecting to find our Sadie locally. But she had been in this film called Lane 1974 that was directed by Esther Chiro, who's another Seattle filmmaker. And she was Lane in that movie, so she'd been the lead and carried that film and gave me great confidence to cast her as the lead in mine because she was excellent in that film, too.
So how was it working with her as the lead in this film?
It was great. It was actually very similar. I mean, the cast is full of people who've been working for decades, and she just kind of fell right in line with that. Like Melanie Lynskey said, it was like working with a peer. I certainly didn't feel like I directed her differently than I directed any of the adults. She came to set prepared. She was very tuned in to the character. She would just kind of, she's not like this girl at all. Like she's much more sort of happy and vivacious, but she really just would be able to, like, you know, when we were ready to go, it's like the shoulders kind of went down and the posture shifted and her gaze went steely and she just went into it.
She knew what she was doing.
Yeah.
What made you want to cast her outside of having seen her before? Because she has an incredible look.
She has a great look.
There are people who are kind of like born for the camera in the sense that I think we often assume that means beauty, and she's a beautiful young girl, but what that means to me usually is that there's something about them that the camera just kind of eats up about their face.
Yeah, she's very watchable. She just kind of, I find her, like, her eyes to be very riveting. She's a lot going on behind them. She has great eyebrows.
Incredible eyebrows, yes.
But yeah, she's just, you know, having seen her in another film and knowing what she was capable of, which is a different role, I still actually asked her to put herself on tape for it because I was looking at other Sadie actors and having them put themselves on tape because none of them were Seattle-based, and so I didn't want her to be on sort of a different playing field. So she auditioned for the film like everyone on tape, and we were going head-to-head with like New York and LA actors and putting, you know, same audition scenes, including there's a very, very intense scene in the film, and it's probably her most intense moment, and that was one of her audition scenes. It's the dress scene. Since you've seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But and just watching her do that and the variations she gave just on tape was like all I needed to see.
You said variations in the sense that she gave you a tape where she did the scene multiple ways.
Yeah, she did 2 or 3, I think 3 different versions and sent all 3.
What does that give you as a director when you see something like that?
Well, it just makes me confident that I'm going to be able to get some, like she won't come to set having prepared one specific thing and be immovable from that thing. Like she's able to try it different ways. And even like as a auditioning actor, she knew that like any one of those might work for me as a director. So she didn't just send me her favorite. She sent me a variation of things. It was great.
Oh, what made you want to tell the story of a single mom and her daughter living in a trailer park and kind of getting by?
Well, I wanted to tell a story about youth and violence, really, and how the world we live in is we're sort of inundated by violence from a lot of different places. Our media, the news, and we've been at war for like 16 years or something. And
the psychosis of perpetual war that we live in right now.
That's what this movie's about. And so I just really I started writing it in 2009. So this is something I was thinking about then, and it's only sort of grown and gotten more sort of alarming to me since then. But just, seeing all these school shootings, seeing all these, mass shooters, all these things that are like the result of, I think, what our society is teaching those who are coming of age right now about how to solve their problems and that violence is an answer.
And the value of life.
Yeah. And so I wanted it to be something that talked about that on the level of, individual American society, but also on a larger scale about how our country solves problems through war and how all this sort of filters down to this girl. And I really just wanted it to be about a girl because I'd seen, stories about youth and violence that centered on young men, seen stories about war that centered on men who are soldiers, but I hadn't seen any of it about a girl.
So you go into writing with those big ideas, how do you then boil them down into a story that doesn't come off as pretentious or preachy? Because this doesn't, but those big ideas, and if you can't sort of filter them into a very relatable story and something that is kind of one-on-one with your character, can become that sort of pretentious, preachy thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you don't think it does. I really, I mean,
What if I had to preface that with like, because you do? No,
yeah, because this is really pretentious.
It's not.
But no, I really just, I'm, as a filmmaker, I sort of start with theme and go in, but I'm very interested in character and acting and finding nuances in performance. And so, once I know what I'm talking about and what I'm trying to make the movie about, then it becomes about who are the people who exist in this world, how do they interact with each other, how do they all contribute to the theme, but more importantly, like how are they impacting each other and playing off of each other, and how organic is it to this environment.
Do you find that even though you start with a big theme, once you start getting in on the ground with the characters and figuring out how they relate to each other, you're willing to abandon that theme if it seems like the characters don't end up going in that direction anymore?
It's hard to imagine that the whole theme would go by the wayside. There's certainly, I'm not married to lines in the script, where if people have ideas about, or if they are, something doesn't feel.
Oh, I'm sorry, not natural. While shooting. I mean,
I see.
If you start with a big theme and then you sit down to write, and as you're writing your characters and their dynamics, it seems like maybe they're going in a different direction than the big ideas that you had initially.
Yeah, I guess I probably would let them guide me a little bit. I certainly didn't intend to write something where that dealt with the opioid crisis as well, which is another theme that this film sort of touches on. But that just kind of came as an organic thing. This character who enters Sadie's world, who's, courting her mom and getting in the way of what she thinks is this sort of perfect family unit of hers, has a painkiller addiction. And that was just something that grew out of needing that character to have something that was a vulnerability and that Sadie could exploit.
Can you talk about how you depict the lives of the people in this trailer park? I think so often the people living under the poverty line or in poverty in this country are depicted a specific way. But Sadie and her mother's trailer is clean, and it's like a home. And she has a job that she goes to on a daily basis, and she has a car, yet they live in a trailer. Oftentimes when we see people who live in trailer parks depicted, they are depicted as people who aren't working, who are too injured to work, who are extremely poor, who are indulgent in their poverty. Whereas with this, we see a woman who works every day. She goes
Yeah.
to her job, but this is what she can afford.
It's a community that we meet who lives there. She, Sadie's family, and then her best friend Francis's family, who live just next door in a different trailer. And we shot in this real functioning trailer park in Everett, Washington, and there were all sorts of people there who went to work every day, and that was just where they lived. It was the rent they could afford. I mean, in cities right now, it's very difficult to afford rent. I know that's true in Seattle. And so
it was like facing a very particular housing crisis,
it's
right?
insane, yeah.
Yeah.
But so it's, it's not just, I feel like, there has been sort of a one-note depiction of the people who populate trailer parks. And that was something that, Ray, who's Melanie Lynskey's character, is a nurse, and she works, and she's a responsible adult, and she's just struggling to get by like everybody, a lot of people in the world. So I wanted to try to be, depict something that I didn't see very often, that sort of struggle of not having income that is, above what you need to get by.
But what I loved about her struggle is that her struggle wasn't that she's sort of struggling to get out of the trailer park, or she's struggling to pay the rent of the trailer park. She's struggling to have a kind of personal life while raising her daughter and having a father overseas, or a husband overseas, which is not the story that we normally get. I think we would normally get a story of a woman who's struggling to pay rent. She loses her job, now she's got to pay rent, or she wants to move out of the trailer park. Not someone who's, this is where I live, this is where I'm raising my daughter, I'm going to do a good job here, and I'm also going to try to have a personal life. Yeah,
and her struggle too is, she's been married to this person that, she married young and had Sadie young and had this certain life planned out for herself, and then her marriage has become estranged. Her husband's sort of re-upping, not coming home in his service, and she's, when we meet her, struggling between clinging to this relationship that is not giving her anything in return and mourning it, and also the excitement of a potential new romantic interest, which she hasn't felt for a really long time. And I think Melanie is so good at showing both of those things sometimes within seconds of each other, that, that conflict that she's feeling as a character through the whole thing, and it's kind of heartbreaking.
You also have Tony Hale in the film, who I just think is such a gem, and we only really get to see him as these sort of blundering, funny characters, which he's absolutely incredible at. His performance in Veep is like one of the best ever on television.
I know, I agree.
But what he does in this movie is so cool, because it's almost a variation on that, but it's not. It's much more subtle and filled with, I think, more substance for a real human being. But there's a little bit of that guy who's trying to get something that he can't get and is a little nervous about.
He would say the emasculation is a constant.
It's still prevalent.
But he's such a gifted dramatic actor, and it's, as much as I adore him in Arrested Development and Veep and what he's doing with those characters, which is very unique and in the world of entertainment. It's nice to see him do something that's more grounded and he's like the beating heart of this movie. He's like the person who's paying attention to Sadie, who needs to be paid attention to, and he's trying to, help her and warn others, and people aren't listening to him. But I think he's so genuine and wonderful in the film.
How did you go about casting him in the movie? Did you think of him when you were writing it?
I thought of him as I was writing it, but I tried not to get too attached to one specific person, because you never know what's going to happen when you're casting. And it took me a long time to make the movie. So,
how long?
9 years.
Whoa!
Yeah. So.
And you've made stuff in between, though.
Yeah,
right?
I made 4 other features while I was trying to get Sadie made. Wow. So in the past.
So you wrote this initially 9 years ago?
I wrote it in 2009, and then as I was trying to get a different film made that had been a long labor of love, this film called The Off Hours that went to Sundance in 2011. And so I wrote Sadie thinking, okay, I'm just going to make this first, and then Off Hours I'll do later. And then I ended up getting Off Hours off the ground. And that led to another movie and another movie and another movie. And then I finally kind of got Sadie back to the front burner. And it was not an easy movie to get made.
What's your sales pitch?
Well, people get really scared of movies that are about kids, but not necessarily a kid's movie. And also just dramas in general are very scary to me.
Movies about class. I
Yeah.
think people get really scared of movies about class in this country unless it's the simple story of someone that's upwardly mobile
Right.
or makes a better, like a very obvious better life for themselves.
Yeah,
Will
that's a good
Smith in
point.
The Pursuit of Happiness or something. Nobody wants to confront the actual kind of static stasis that capitalism kind of provides for a lot of people in this country.
That's true. And
Yeah.
it was a, you know, my producer, Lacey Leavitt, who's been on it since the beginning with me, has, you know, we've just been sort of trying every which way for so many years to get it made. And then my other producer, Jenna West, who came on at the end, we all just sort of like at the tail end of it, we were just like motivated by the election that had just happened in 2016 and just our desire to do something that was meaningful and had, that could contribute to a cultural conversation. And we just pushed it over the finish line that way.
What about depicting the white working class, for lack of a better term, or the working poor, made you reflect on the election?
It was more about the violence aspect of our political conversation and just, you know, what we're doing and more specifically not doing that I wanted to talk about. And just the fact that we're not really engaging in these conversations about, like, not just this sort of more simplistic, like, you know, first-person shooter games cause people to go shoot people. It's. I don't think it's that simple. I think it's, excuse me. I think it's the sort of consequence-free violence that we're inundated with, where people are shooting people and we're not seeing them be impacted by it psychologically. We're not seeing them have any effect on them. You know, bodies are falling, but people just kind of are going on with their day in games and movies and even just
In
life and the news. I think it's a really damaging thing, because if I shot someone, it would really deeply affect me for the rest of my life. You know, I just don't see that enough, and I think it's hurting us.
Well, you're right about the sort of trickle-down effect in regards to, if you think of something like Parkland, it's 17 kids, and there's been no action on that whatsoever on the political level. So that has to trickle down in terms of how much do these kids mean to us? How much do kids mean to us? How much does life mean to us?
Right, and I think it's also like I'm hopeful that, you know, things will happen on a political level, but I also feel like we also need to reflect individually on our own culpability. Like, what am I putting out into the world? What am I accepting as a consumer that's allowing for this stuff to continue inundating our society?
Was there a part of you that wanted to depict, for lack of a better phrase, the white working class with dignity after the election? Because there was a lot of talk after the election that they were the cause of the election of Donald Trump, which has, you know, have essentially been proven wrong in a lot of ways. But they became a kind of a blame point for a lot of members in the media.
Well, honestly, I there's not a character in any movie that I've ever made that I didn't want to portray with dignity. So that was certainly something I was thinking about for these characters, but not necessarily as a reflection of the election. I feel like everyone's got reasons for making the choices that they make, and we learn more by trying to explore what those reasons are and why they've come to those conclusions than we do judging. So
you are self-distributing the movie.
we have a partnership with Amazon, who's doing the streaming release in February.
Cool.
But we are doing a creative distribution effort for the theatrical and for our iTunes release. So
what does that
we're
mean?
Basically building those from the ground up. The theatrical we've been working on it for 4 months. It comes out tonight in New York and LA. But it's been a lot of design, you know, sort of taking things into our own hands. I've made 5 other features before this, and I worked with distributors on all of them. And it's, you know, that's a great experience because you get to sort of release it to someone else's custody and watch what they do with it. And to a degree, that's great because you can go on with your life and do other things. But to a degree, it's also can be a little heartbreaking because you've spent so much time and energy on creating something, and then it sort of goes out of your control how it gets delivered to the world. And with Sadie, since it was such a labor of love and it was so important to us how people were presented with it, we decided to turn away other sort of traditional distribution deals and take it into our own hands, which is something that has been becoming a little bit more of a common model. I mean, people have always done it, but Sundance started the creative distribution lab or whatever, and they released a case study about this film called Columbus that came out last year. Oh, yeah. And it was really like empowering to read it, to see that you could go about these things or sort of on your own and potentially have more success and see more of a return than you might through a traditional distributor. So
what does that entail for you?
So, well, basically we had a bonus to work with from Amazon, so we had a little bit of a budget. We had set aside some of our production budget to do it too. So we had people that we brought on. We have a distribution strategist named Mia Bruno, who's been helping us book theaters and design this impact campaign where we reach out to youth groups and military groups and people who we think might resonate with the themes of this movie and let them know where screens are happening. We have discounts for military families and youth and women's filmmaking groups happening at all of our screenings. And we have like a free teen screening on, I think it's Tuesday night.
So it almost becomes a kind of grassroots distribution effort.
It is,
where you are going directly to the people who would be most affected by the film and using that to begin the conversation and build word of mouth.
Yeah.
Versus a regular distributor who would like throw up some posters, put out some...
Yeah, spend money.
Yeah.
Which, that's what we have, like, don't have that much money. So we have to be really strategic about how we we're working with this company called Thin Pig to do social media campaigns and digital marketing, which is part of it. But our budget for that is so meager compared to like what a Hollywood film has to spend. So we have to supplement it.
Well, not a Hollywood film, but an indie distributor. I mean, I don't want to throw any indie distributors under the bus or anything. I don't even have anyone in mind when I'm thinking of this. But I think that are we kind of seeing that in the last few years, the sort of typical way to market a movie that requires that money and still costs money doesn't necessarily work the way that it used to?
I'm not sure it does. And I think that distributors tend to be more of a volume business, and they have to, just to stay afloat, they have to take on, they have to acquire more movies than they really have, actual time to give a specific campaign for every, if they're going to look at every movie and do the amount of work we did for Sadie in the last 4 months, they would only be able to do like 2 movies a year. And so it's like, it's understandable. And I also don't want to throw them under the bus because I would love to keep working with distributors. It is really hard to do it yourself. But it's taught me a lot actually about what they face that I didn't know about as a person who was just like asking for things.
Oh, that's cool, because that's kind of that's that feeling of someone's doing a lot of work, but you don't know what the work they're doing is, and you don't see it.
And you just assume like you guys can just snap your fingers and get programmed in my movie programmed wherever you want, and that's not necessarily the case. So I've learned a lot, and I don't want to diss traditional distribution, but at the same time, there is a lot you can do on a sort of a grassroots level that I think isn't done by a lot of people. And unless it is your movie and you care about it as much as I care about this movie, my producers care about this movie, like, I don't know who would put this much energy into it besides us.
It's exhausting?
It's exhausting, yeah. I'm at the end of a big, long push for it. So I really want people to discover this movie this weekend and talk about it. And, we've been blogging about our creative distribution, so we have that on our website at sadiefilm.com. We've been doing all sorts of Q&As, and we went on this thing called the Southern Circuit, which is they take you to all these underserved communities in the South where you get to engage with mostly college students who don't have art houses in their hometowns, and they never have met a director, and you get to have these conversations with them and see how the movie impacts and translates, to people who aren't like cinephiles in the major metropolitan areas. And it's been so incredibly encouraging to take it out in that way and have all these conversations because we made it to start a conversation. So to be able to go out ourselves and have them, have talks with people afterwards and how the movie's impacting them, it's been just really like, it revitalizes me every time I get to do it.
And getting the chance to show it to people who, like you said, aren't necessarily cinephiles. While us cinephiles are wonderful, I think it's kind of cool, right, to be able to see how your movie lands with the general population.
Yeah, it's really because it's like I'm not just making movies for people who see 5 movies a week. I'm trying to make movies for the general population. And
movies in their original form were a populist art form. Yeah.
And I think this movie has something to say to people who are not just living in cities, you know. And so that's been really good. I love going out into we're doing more academic screenings coming up this fall to get out there and talk to more young people about it. And we also premiered the film at internationally at this festival called Giffoni, which is a youth festival, and they bring kids from 50 plus countries, and they are your jury. And then you have this extensive Q&A after your movie, and then they vote on which movie they liked. And we won at that festival, which was really amazing. But the best part about the experience was the Q&A and seeing that these kids from all over the place, all over the globe, understood the themes of it and were resonating with them and asking really good questions about it and thinking about it. And so it, you know, not just, you know, trying to get outside the cities of the U.S., but trying to get outside the U.S. and have these conversations on a larger scale.
Before I go to audience Q&A, you know, there's one thing that we forgot. Mike McCready of Pearl Jam did the music for the movie, right?
Yeah.
How did that, I mean, I get it. You're from Seattle. You guys
we all know each other. It's fine.
Yeah. How did that happen?
Well, I made a movie called Lucky Them with Toni Collette and Thomas Hayden Church. It was about the Seattle music scene. And I met Mike at a screening of that. A friend of mine, Kate Bailey, brought him, they're friends, and she introduced me to him afterwards, and he was like, you know, this movie really felt like it represented the Seattle music community really well, and I was just kind of swooning because that was what a compliment from that, you know, from his
the king of the Seattle music
someone
community,
who's been there for so long, and I've been such a Pearl Jam fan for so long that I was really excited. And he said at that point, I'm looking to get into composing. I want to do more work for scoring films, so let me know if you ever have a project you want to talk about. So Sadie was that project.
You were like, I will pocket that card. Thank you.
Yeah, he checked in a couple times too, because he really was. I mean, as you know, luckily he's got a pretty great day job, but he's been like really interested in exploring film composing, and so this is his first narrative feature. He's done some documentaries leading before this, but
what was the process like working with him? Did you send him your cut and then he sent you some tracks back?
Well, I tend to start early with composers because I hate working with temp music. I get really attached to it, or I never find the right thing, and it's bad either way. So I like to work with actual music that I might be able to use for the film all through the edit. And so I tend to start very early and work where I ask the composer to do sort of a blast of music, and then I see how it fits, and then we get, you know, sort of more and more dialed in over the course of the edit. So by the time the picture's locked, it's pretty close to the score's locked too. And so that was the process we did. He brought in these two women from this band called Thunder Pussy. That's amazing Seattle band that's going on U.S. tour right now. And they all collaborated, and I got to go and like hang out in Mike's studio and watch them just kind of create along with my editor Celia, and we were just blissing out. It was so exciting to watch them work and just how they played off each other and just played every instrument, and you know, we just come up with things off the bat. And I think we're going to do a soundtrack, so people can look for that. Yeah.
Let's ask some questions. I think we have two questions from the audience. Who was right here? Hi.
Hi. So I was wondering, in the past 9 years of trying to get Sadie off the ground, how many times did you revisit the script and change the characters based off of what was going on around the world?
You know, I don't think I worked on it pretty steadily between 2009 and like 2011, 12. But when I would go back to it, it was usually with notes from people who were, you know, saying no to us, like, you know, can you change the ending? Can you do this or that? Can you make the character a boy instead of a girl? And every time I'd go back to the script, I'd just feel really resolute that it was where I wanted it to be. And so a lot of the themes that are in it were things that I guess were bubbling back in 2009. And just, you know, every time I read it, it just kind of would reinforce the fact that I really wanted to get it made, because I was like, I really want to contribute to this conversation with my, you know, like what I do. And so it didn't really change that much. The very end, I did a little bit of an actor pass where I just made sure it felt right for them, but I didn't do major changes in the meantime.
One more.
Hi.
Hi.
I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
As well. So as you've mentioned before, this has been 9 years in the making. So I wanted to know, what do you feel is the most important part about taking your time with projects like Sadie? And also, what do you feel is the most rewarding part
That's a great question. I would say that I didn't ever intend to take my time for 9 years. I was hoping to make it in 2010 or 11, but I do think it has grown more relevant. Just sort of in the climate we're living in, and I also think I grew a lot as a filmmaker over the time. So I've been able to sort of deepen my own skill set, and I think make ultimately what's a better movie. But yeah, it was just that knowing that it was there and that I was motivated to do it, and that I still really personally resonated with it so much was always what I came back to when it was getting hard to keep going, because it's hard to keep a project, pushing the boulder up the hill for 9 years. But I would read it and be like, yeah, I really still want to tell this story and sort of submit this into the national conversation. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the issues from 2009 have not gone away. They feel exacerbated and accelerated.
Yeah, I agree.
So the movie opens in New York and LA right now, right? What theaters in New York and LA?
In New York, it's at Cinema Village
right.
Tonight, and I'm doing Q&As tonight with John Gallagher Jr. from the film, and Rebecca Luke, who's our costume designer, for the 5:10 and 7:10 shows. And then it's in LA at the Arena Cine Lounge. And my producer Lacey's out there sort of manning those screenings, and then I go there tomorrow. So we're doing as many in-person engagements as we can over the course of the run, and all of the information about who's where and when it's playing is at our website, sadiefilm.com.
Go to sadiefilm.com, find out where you can see it in a theater, and go see it in a theater, because it's a great movie, and she's distributing it herself, and that's amazing. Support.
Help us. Talk about it with your friends.
Yes.
See it. Please talk about it with us online, too.
Congratulations, everybody. A big round of applause for Megan Griffiths. Let's hear it.